Hello, everyone, and welcome. It is the top of the hour, so we are going to get started. So glad you could join us today for a rating scale boot camp. We have a little bit of time, but we're going to cover a lot of material, and I guarantee you're going to walk away from this event with a ton of great changes you can implement that are going to be impactful. My name is Natalie Trudell. I am the Director of Sales and Marketing for emPerform. It's my pleasure to be here today. I will be introducing our hosts, but before I do that, just a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded, so don't worry, we will send out the recording. You could always revisit it at another time. We do encourage questions. We might not have a lot of time for questions, but definitely get them into the chat panel. You'll also have an opportunity after the webinar to submit additional questions. Overall, we are here to make sure that we're addressing your questions on this very important topic. And finally, stay until the end because we will be giving away 2 Amazon gift cards for anyone who's joined today, so that will be really exciting. And with that, I am thrilled to introduce your hosts today. Ahmed and Julie are wonderful consultants here at emPerform. They deal with setting up performance review programs every single day, and a big part of those discussions centers around content and rating scales. So they're going to share the information that we have with you. Ahmed and Julie, thank you so much, and I'll hand things over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Natalie, and good afternoon, everybody. So on today's agenda, we're going to be going through the rating dilemma. We're going to look at 3 principles for effective rating scales, and then we're going to end it off with how to actually tailor your rating scales the right way. Okay, so let's navigate through this. Let's start with the rating scale dilemma. So as we know, ratings can often cause a lot of anxiety, especially when they are numerical. And they can also be ineffective because employees can get the same ratings year after year. And sometimes employees don't even know what these ratings mean. They feel concerned on what it may mean down the road or in other processes like compensation, promotions, and things like that. We also know that ratings can be pretty judgmental and subjective. So we know that it allows managers the opportunity to provide that subjective bias, whether it's thinking only about the last 6 weeks, like a recency bias, or a halo effect where you kind of rate everybody moderately so you avoid having those pretty difficult conversations. And then, of course, there's a new world of thought out there that says, you know what, let's just eliminate rating scales altogether, and that will fix the problems with performance management. So this is not the case, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But I just wanted to show this really great quote. This is in an article by Harvard Business Review. It's called Reinventing Performance Management. And basically what this is saying is that they did a study on rating scales, and what they found when looking at a lot of performance management systems is that the ratings actually said more about the rater than it did about the ratee. So that's just something interesting to think about. All right, so this sounds good in theory, right? Let's say we said no ratings. Let's cut those out. The problem is that when we decide that we actually need the ratings for something, then when we don't have our ratings, this actually becomes a big issue. So we've found that organizations who have removed ratings are either bringing them back or they're still kind of rating in the back. So there's kind of these ghost ratings, what we call them, where these ratings are being done at a management team level, but they're not being discussed with the employees. Now, this is not an ideal way to structure a review process, as you know, because we're not going to be transparent with our employees if we're doing these kind of ghost ratings. So if we did remove ratings, how would we structure reward? How would we structure recognition? How would we structure promotions? These are all important questions we need to ask ourselves. And overall, we feel that kind of eliminating ratings, there's a lot of challenge that go with that. So now this brings us back, right? So maybe we do need ratings. Let's talk about what they are good for. What positives do they have? Of course, they can be used for formal recognition of contribution, and that is super, super important because that leads to employee engagement. After all, if an employee is doing a great job, they want to be told that they're doing a great job, right? They want to be recognized for their contributions. They're also the basis of every single reward system we've come across in the last 20 something years in this space. So we feel that rather than giving up on ratings, why don't we make more of an effort to actually use effective ratings? Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about now. And this brings us to the 3 principles of effective rating scales. So the first principle is purpose. This one's pretty simple. When we're looking at ratings, we have to have a reason to use them, right? If you're going to choose to use rating scales, you need to actually have a reason. Okay. Sorry, my slide just moved. The second principle is alignment. So ratings need to be aligned with the content of what's actually being rated. And this is actually a big miss that we see out there. And the third principle is focus. So we actually recommend the focus to be on words or adjectives rather than the numbers in the rating scales. So let's talk a little bit about each of these in more detail. So purpose. Our first principle is what are some of the good reasons to use the ratings? So if you need a way to report, differentiate on performance, if you're tying your performance scores to compensation decisions, right? Everything you're looking at is metrics and numbers. If ratings come into play with the investment that you're putting into talent, people want to be given ratings on their performance. We're used to be rated on everything. In school, we were always rated with our report cards, with tests, so we're used to that. So if you think about the goals of why you're using rating scales, that is probably the most important element. We need to think about what the purpose of the ratings are for our unique organizations. Do we need them? And if we need them, why? And how are we going to use them? Okay, so you may decide, as I was kind of mentioning before, that maybe we don't have a reason to use them. And these situations do come up as well, right? They're fewer and far between, but they do come up. In small workforces, if you do have a small workforce of 30 to 60 people, ratings may seem arbitrary. So getting the same ratings year after year becomes less meaningful and less impactful. It is harder to get away from ratings when you're a bigger organization. That's really difficult to do. But maybe in this scenario, we don't need to report on ratings. Maybe we're using ratings today, but the only rating that matters is when it's actually told to the employees, but it doesn't do anything after that. It doesn't go anywhere. So maybe it doesn't drive compensation decisions or merit decisions, and it doesn't drive succession or promotion decisions. And we base that on other factors like skills, experience, but we don't look at ratings to give promotions. And maybe there's no reason for the ratings in this case, right? Maybe that's the important question to ask. At the end of this performance management process, how do the ratings get looked at and what do they get used for? So, if people in your organization would say the problem with your performance management process is ratings, and if the majority would say that the ratings are meaningless and they equate ratings to performance management, then maybe it is time to try something different, without ratings in it. But this last bullet is super important here and is a big one to consider. And we do this a lot with our new clients, which is part of the new era of performance management, which is saying that we're moving more and more to a process that's more check-in based and conversation based. And because of that and the frequency of that, applying an arbitrary rating once a year really doesn't make sense. All right, so our second principle, and for me, this has kind of been the most important one, is matching the rating to the content of what's being rated. So that's always been implicit in emPerform. We can use different rating scales across different evaluation areas that we have in the product, and we always encourage that. So you really don't have to, and you shouldn't use the same rating scales you use for competencies as you do for objectives and development plans. All right. And the third principle we have here is actually rethinking the value of showing numbers. So that 1 to 5 scale that we all know and love, it works really well from a reporting perspective, but it doesn't really work from an employee motivation perspective, an engagement perspective, and numbers are often perceived as being negative. Right? We know there's studies out there that show a great majority of employees don't really understand the numbers. It's not in their comfort zone and they don't want to be equated to a 3.41 out of 5. I know that we can all agree on that. It just doesn't feel nice to see that when it comes to your performance. Right, so this is this infamous traditional 5-point rating scale. It's probably the most used rating scale in North America. And, we have no problem with this rating scale, right? A lot of our clients use it and this works super well. The issue is only when it's being used to rate specific content. So if we were using it to rate competencies, have we actually defined the expectation? If we're using it to rate goals, how can we exceed that goal or significantly exceed a goal, right? How does this tie to the content? The rating scale needs to align to the content, and a lot of the times we see the scale being used, it doesn't. All right, so Morgan Stanley actually got rid of their 1 to 5 rating scale, and they're asking evaluators to use adjectives to describe performance. So here's just one example of a big organization making this change, and they found that this is bringing a lot more value to their performance management process. right? So what about the metrics? I'm sure that's what everybody's thinking now. What about the metrics? And the answer is simple. If you focus on the text and just keep a number in the background, then you're able to say, yes, you're meeting expectations. You're a 3 out of 5. If you're a superstar, you're a 5 out of 5. But you don't need to show the numbers. You can keep them hidden and still drive metrics while keeping the raw numbers in the back end for reporting purposes. Right? So, just kind of in summary, we know that ratings for most of us remain kind of as that backbone for performance management. So, our conclusion here would just be it all comes back to our purpose, our alignment, and our focus. We need to know why we're using them. We need to align them with content. And of course, we believe text based is better than numbers. All right, so let's look at some options here. I'll pass it over to you, Ahmed.
All right, thank you, Julie. Very, very insightful information there, so appreciate that. So right now, I'm just going to focus on ratings and how we match, how it should match the content. So let's look at an example here on goals. So for goals, ideally, you'd like to use a status scale, which is updated throughout the year. We also like to use something along the lines of a percentage completion scale. Again, it's just good to show the progress on the goal. So for goals, there shouldn't be a measurement on the quality of completion, but more it should be on the status, because the quality is already defined within the expectations of the goal. For example, if you're using a SMART framework, you're already defining the specifics and how it's measurable. So right now we just want to know the status, and let's look at some examples now. Okay, so an example here is a goal achievement scale. So you have it goes from goal achieved to whether it's active, whether it's not met, or canceled or deferred. So these ratings can be clearly defined to help guide employees in the right direction, along with their well-defined and set goals for the year. So again, as we mentioned with the SMART framework, because it includes the specifics and the measurables, as well as the T, which is the target completion date. So with that definition and the definitions of the ratings, this will help employees and managers select the most accurate status or rating on the goal. So you can also add any additional ratings to this scale to help provide more accurate statuses. And also with the canceled and deferred option, as you might be aware, there's not an applicable option to avoid any impact on the overall score. So it just helps them set that status. And then of course, when it comes to setting goals for next year, they'll be able to identify which goals were canceled or deferred and set those for the next cycle. Okay, so another example of a goal scale is the percentage or completion rate. So these can be used for goals as well as for development items or any training material, for example, any courses. So again, as long as these items, for example, with training, if your employee is doing a course and they add that into the review, so as long as it's well defined and entails what progress is and what it will look like for that specific course, then this way they can select the right status, and this will be a nice visual for the manager and any other review roles involved in the process. Okay, so another example here, and this is more tailored for employees. So as you can see here, it helps them set a clear status on their goals. And again, it just gives managers and any other review roles involved a clear status of where the employee sees themselves with this goal in the current process. It's also a nice indirect way for an employee to communicate to their manager of where they feel like they're with their goal. Sometimes some employees are not too comfortable discussing their progress with the goal face to face. So this is a nice indirect way for managers to see if, for example, if employee selects they would like some assistance with the goal, they can clearly see that within the review, and then reach out to the employee and find a way how they can complete that goal. Okay, thank you. So the next here we'll talk about is competencies and skills. So traditionally, this has been a problem area in performance management. There could be some subjective manager bias involved in this. So that's why it's nice to clearly identify these goals and have them well defined. So it's difficult to quantify more than goals, so you cannot rate on progress or quality. So again, the rating must match the content. So when it comes to skills and competencies and any other items related to these, the key is about what's being observed. Okay, so let's look at an example of one of these scales. So over here, you see the observation frequency scale. So when we look at competencies, we want to see or want to know how often do we observe it. So the key advantage here is that the rater becomes an observer. Okay, so you can add this scale to make it much more detailed. And again, it's nice to tailor it to the set of competencies or skills that you have in your performance reviews. So you want to make sure they're detailed and personalized or unique to those set of competencies. Okay, so earlier we talked about how goals should be well defined by employees and managers to help them select the correct status of the goal. So in this case, the competencies and rating scale involved must be well defined. This rating scale can also be used in peer reviews or 360 reviews. So it helps them see how much do you see the behavior or that skill exhibited by the employee. Okay, so another example of a scale here is a proficiency scale. So this one is also nice, especially if you're focusing on behavior. So you can see the descriptions here for each scale. So you have advanced, and it tells you exactly how an employee would fall in that category of advanced for their competency. You have the developing, it tells you it's a new skill. So might have a negative tone to it. So it's always nice to tweak it. And if you want to make it more positive, for example, you can say it is expected to be developing and try to define it much more clearly. So this one lends itself to be more on the skill side, but again, there is that little fine line. Okay, so next here, as we saw with the goals, so we'll look at one that's more about self-rating. So as you're aware, in emPerform, employee ratings are not included in the overall score. So you can use the specific rating to help guide the employee with developing their skills or competencies. Okay, so these ratings, they help to set the standard and direction for employees. That way they can make it a strength. Again, this is might they might use this as opportunity to communicate where they think they fall with the skill or competency. Again, there might be that complication or that maybe they're not too comfortable admitting they're not strong in one area and might need some help. So if as a manager, if I go in and I see an employee selects that they are improving in their abilities for a certain competency, so I can try to observe more and see how that employee is improving in that certain area and how I can find different ways to help them make it a strength. Okay, so last here is just a quick reminder on the ratings in emPerform. So emPerform supports both numeric and text-based rating scales, as you all might know. Ratings can use either numbers, text, or even both. Rating scales do not need to be the same for each content area, as you might have found out. And yeah, so we don't have to, we recommend making certain rating scales tailored for certain content. So it's just to be aware of what kind of rating scales you're creating for whichever content area within the review. Also with emPerform, we support parent-child ratings. So this allows more flexibility where managers and employees can rate on individual behaviors or descriptors within a specific competency, and that will provide a rating which then rolls up to the overall evaluation area score. So ratings can be used to calculate an overall score or not. So they can just be used for the purpose of setting a status, and then you can have a separate scale, a rating scale when it comes to the year-end evaluations to provide a final evaluation rating. And there's no requirement at Perform to have ratings at all. And we do have some of our clients using that approach where there are no ratings involved. All right, so lastly here is just a reminder that we do have a lot of different resources available to you to help you and guide you in creating the most effective and useful rating skills in your performance management systems. So we do have this rating scale guidebook that you'll find in our help guide, and I'm sure you'll find a link of it in the chat as well today. Okay, thank you so much. I'll pass it along to Natalie.
Thank you so much, Julie and Ahmed. That's a ton of content. That's why we called it a boot camp. But I will say that the ebook that we have developed is available on our site. I'm going to get that link so that you have it. There you go. Oh, I don't know if it pasted. Yeah, there you go. So in your chat panel, there is a link to download that rating scale guidebook. It is a fantastic resource. It goes through all of these examples and more. Hopefully you took some stuff away. I really can't stress enough that we have seen the best performance management programs completely taken down with the wrong rating scale. The minute users don't find it applicable or it's vague, you're not going to get the metrics or achieve the goals that you want. So if there's anything you take away today, it's go back to those rating scales, really take a look at what you're trying to accomplish with them. Are they clear? Are they connected? Are you getting what you need? Is there anything you can change? And I guarantee it will shift the focus from trying to deal with the rating scale to focusing on the content. So that was absolutely excellent. I know this is a short time period, so if you have any questions, get them into the chat. There will also be a survey that pops up after this that will allow you another opportunity to connect with our consultants, ask your questions. But what I'd like to do right now is draw for some great prizes. So I have randomly selected from the attendees today, and I'm happy to announce that the winners of the $100 Amazon gift card, so we have 2 of them, are Nora Newhouse and Sherry Williams. So congratulations, Nora and Sherry. We'll send you an email after this event so you can claim your prize. We definitely thank you all for joining this event. We want to have more of these events for you. So like I said, take a moment with that survey. Tell us what other topics you'd like to cover, what other questions that you have. Thank you again, Ahmed and Julie, and we'll give you a little time back in your day today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.